You kill, I kill. You rob, I rob. Only difference I can see is I choose whom I kill and rob, and you destroy everything in your path.
There is only one possible way for me to start this Red Dead Redemption 2 review, and that's by saying that after playing for around 15 to 20 hours when the game came out, apart from its stunning visuals, it had several issues that were just sucking the fun out of the game. Even though I thoroughly enjoyed the first one, the sequel just wasn't hitting those heights. I moved on to other games, and over the course of the next year, I would return to it a few times, only to be met with the same disappointments. I decided once and for all to give it one last shot, returning once again over a year after its release. With no hype and no discussion surrounding the game anymore, I sat down and played multiple hours to make my final verdict about the game. After almost doubling my previous playtime, the game was starting to grow on me, even if there were still problems I had with it. But as the hours began to clock up and pass by rather quickly, Red Dead Redemption 2 went from a title I wanted to skip to becoming one that will stick with me for a long time. Red Dead Redemption 2 went from mediocrity to a masterpiece. For this video, I wanted to review what worked and what didn't in my particular case, but ultimately, how I became rather attached to the lead character of Arthur Morgan, and how his presence and magnificent performance made me look past the slight problems and just get lost in this incredible game. This is about my journey of the game and the redemption of Red Dead 2. Now, anyone with eyes can see just how remarkable this game looks in all areas, and the amount of work that Rockstar puts in needs to be commended. If this was a much shorter, more structured linear game, I would walk away impressed. But the fact that Red Dead Redemption 2 looks this damn good whilst also being set in a huge open world is just insane. No matter where you look, the game is gorgeous, and this extends to the different times of day and variations in environments throughout its long playtime. Whether riding through the open fields underneath the sweltering sun or faint glow from the moonlight, approaching a town late at night with the lights on, or walking through swamplands bathed in glowing fog where the light can't entirely penetrate through its thickness. Playing on the Xbox One X in 4K made Red Dead Redemption 2 one of the best looking games I've laid my eyes on, and then we get to all of the small details, the little things that you notice, and which help make the world feel alive, especially when there is so much open space. Watching Arthur's facial hair grow and move accordingly to how long it is, watching him get bloodied and dirty when skinning an animal or moving through mud, the smoke from campfires rising up in the distance, which could offer up some worthwhile items, how you can shoot the hats off of enemies as they can with yours, or how Arthur can become hot or cold depending on his environment, which will affect him physically. There are countless details which have been crammed into this game, and they all add up to Rockstar creating one of the most expansive and realistic open worlds in recent years. From the way your clothing moves, the sway of trees and grass in the wind, or your horse's mane, the glistening of water, and the reflections which bounce off of it. It's all incredible, looks stunning, and has mostly a solid and consistent frame rate on the Xbox One X, with it only ever really dipping a small amount in large towns, which makes everything that much more impressive. Houses and outdoor buildings have an appearance and a look befitting of what they are and where they are. Wealthy estates exhibit that wealth in grounds and a building which is well kept, whereas others, whose owners have long since left, sees the house display itself in a state of disrepair, which continues inside. Indoor areas are given the same treatment with aged or worn furniture in these places, along with untidiness, as if the structure has hosted several individuals or groups within this world before you stumbled upon it. The detail also extends to the weapons and even your horse, which can become dirty over time, which also hinders the effectiveness when shooting the guns or riding your horse, and each will need to be looked after for them to remain at their peak performance. Even the wildlife which exists out in the wild are all given the same amount of detail and care, which further emphasizes how graphically impressive the game is, and how all of the details, both large and small, contribute to making this world feel realistic and lived in. The technical prowess of Red Dead Redemption 2 extends beyond its visual offering and delivers sound which is in perfectly keeping with the mood and tone of the game. Traversing the beautiful landscapes with minimal music is exactly what I want, with the music kicking in at certain times only, often when the action ramps up or of course during gunfights. I'll expand on all areas of sound, but one point I wanted to make is that good sound design isn't just about what you hear. It's about those times where you hear nothing, and this can enhance a scene so much. Listening to the wildlife and birds chirp, but then slowly riding your horse, walking or even standing still out in the open gave me a sense of isolation and solitude where I could really take in the beauty of the setting and just how wonderful an open world Rockstar have created. Listening to the birds and wildlife as you listen to the sounds of the clip-clop of your horse as it moves over grass, dirt, through water or the paved roads of the larger towns. And then we get the really deep, rhythmic beat of the horse as it breaks into a canter and then onto a gallop. Focusing on the incredible sound design and hearing the stirrups rattle as your horse neighs or its heavy breathing as it becomes tired. Hearing the sounds of each gun firing, the sounds of footsteps walking along old creaking floorboards, which sound different to walking along the wooden surfaces such as those outside the post offices. Then the sounds walking through grass or dirt, which is often the case around your camp. The sounds of bullets ricocheting, the sounds of Arthur loading bullets into the gun's chamber or reloading rifles. It all sounds superb and really brings the environment to life, but then all of these sound effects can also change based upon what is happening around them. Hearing the sounds of gunfire echo based upon where the weapon was fired or how the sounds are heightened when accompanied by the silence at night or somewhere isolated. The music of Red Dead Redemption 2 I found was used sparingly as alluded to earlier, but it also has some classically inspired Western themes which go hand in hand with the action. Riding around on horseback with your allies as you are all killing your pursuers, it feels like you are playing through the old Western movies, but with the dashes of deadwood sprinkled over everything, so it's all more violent, bloody, dirty, and less black and white. But then, the game can be very subtle, especially in the more emotional or serious moments throughout the story. It would be easy for Rockstar to fill the game full of that classic Western music, considering that the game is that, but it needed restraint, and that's exactly what it has. Then we move on to the dialogue, and overall, it's delivered fantastically with meaning and emotion. You can hear the controlled anger, sadness or frustration in the characters' voices. Not everyone is spectacular, but they are all of a high standard, and the main characters where you need quality voice acting, it's definitely there. Characters such as Dutch, Micah, John, Abigail, Sadie and Leviticus all give fantastic performances, with the likes of Dutch and Micah really being able to carry a scene, and especially with Dutch, I was always glued to it when he spoke during cutscenes or even during gameplay segments when listening to conversations between characters. And then we get to Arthur Morgan, who I'll say is some of the best voice acting I've heard in any game, and it isn't just the quality on its own. It's the sheer amount of lines that need to be delivered, and they are all given with intensity and subtlety when required. I decided to leave out speaking about character animations when speaking of the visuals, as I wanted to focus on it here, as between the fantastic voice acting and the high quality of the animations, especially with the main characters and in particular Arthur, they join together to create performances that look and act like real people, and that's important when dealing with a game with the length that Red Dead Redemption 2 has. Between the voice acting and performance of Arthur Morgan, Rockstar delivered a character beyond that of John Marston. He's more mature and complicated, with a genuine sense of caring for others and putting their well-being above his own. The group is greater than him, going from barely being able to find the will to keep playing Red Dead Redemption 2 to finishing the game and Arthur Morgan becoming one of my favourite characters in recent years, if not of all time. Hearing him read out his journal entries, seeing how his character develops over the course of the game, where things become complicated whilst also other factors come into question. I will touch on the length of the game later and some issues I had with it, but one positive is that I needed the long length of the game to become truly attached to this character. But with taking quite a bit of time for me to actually start enjoying the game, there must have been aspects of it I didn't like, and even now I'm still undecided whether they enhance the experience or detract from it. Let's start with the animations, which I was praising, and when it comes to fleshing out a character and making them appear more realistic, with all of the subtleties that Rockstar have included, the animations contribute a lot to achieving this. But what about when it comes to gameplay? Controlling Arthur can sometimes be a chore where the control doesn't seem responsive and every movement can feel sluggish and lethargic. This shows itself early on with not being able to run at all whilst in camp, and this annoyed me every time. It fits in with the realism, as does not being able to ride your horse through the camp either. Come on, I felt like a child under a no running policy, and it made these sections unnecessarily tedious, especially when needing to talk to several people, have a shave, then go back to your horse. How Arthur loots dead bodies was more realistic than other games, whereby he would slightly pick them up and pat them down for items. Doing this multiple times after a battle is also tedious and time consuming, but looting is automatic and the animation plays out. But the control also poses a problem many times as it feels unresponsive. There is a slight delay between pressing a button or even making Arthur walk forward. This provides more weight to the movement and gives it more realism, but it still seems unresponsive and can be an issue, especially if it contributes to you running into somebody by either walking, running, or whilst on your horse, which makes you wanted by the police. The heavy weight to the movement can also make walking in smaller indoor environments, through multiple rooms and up and down stairs, be more challenging than it needed. Plus, other animations can seem overly long, such as skinning animals, or even simply picking up items or opening and closing drawers. On their own, they don't pose too much of a problem, but when you put them all together, plus include the long game length, they will be an issue for some people. I did become more used to the movement as time went on, and it was the characters' storytelling and variety during the missions which kept my interest in the game. And this is where we get into the various gameplay areas of Red Dead Redemption 2, as they can vary between great and not so good. Having access to a number of guns from the Wild West is a nice change when coming from more modern day shooters, and the sounds they make and the customization players can add to them is good, but the combat itself is average at best. The cover system can be problematic, especially when we take the unresponsive control and more realistic movement into account. This can pose problems with the collision detection, especially when multiple objects are next to each other, wanting to hide in cover but getting behind the wrong object, and this problem happens when moving between cover as well. Actual gunfights can be too simplistic, and I wanted to have more control over them, with more emphasis on aiming and skill instead of the over-reliance on auto-aim, which plagues the game and is also an issue in the Grand Theft Auto series as well. Hearing the cracks of gunfire from different weapons, hearing the splintering of wood from bullets, the yells and screams of the enemies, hearing Arthur yell back as he reloads the guns. It all paints a wonderful picture and looks and sounds fantastic, but then you realize you really aren't doing all that much. Zooming in on an enemy and taking him out with a high-powered weapon as you aim manually is something to savor in a game which is so reliant on auto-aim and where the pistols feel so weak, needing multiple bullets to kill each enemy. I mentioned earlier how good it was riding around on horseback shooting enemies, and it's great when I look at the big picture, but I'd like Rockstar to focus on having more depth with their combat systems. Firstly, so players need more skill and have more control over gunfights, and secondly, to combat another issue, the difficulty. I wouldn't have died more than twice in any given mission, either side quest or in the main storyline, and the amount of times that actually occurred I could count on one hand, and that's over the course of dozens and dozens of hours. A couple of these would have even been within stealth missions where I wasn't paying enough attention and got spotted, but it also showed that Rockstar are really at the top of their game when it comes to storytelling, character development, world building and writing. But more work needs to be done when it comes to combat, and to not be afraid for the game to be challenging, or at least provide options for those who want more difficulty or for those who want even less. One area which I like a lot when it comes to the world and missions in the game is that of the map and side quests. Often in open world games these days, you open up the map and players see so many icons scattered around, they often don't know which are important, which will help them level up, which are main missions, which are side missions, and which are worthwhile skipping altogether unless you are a completionist. Riding around the world of Red Dead 2, you'll come across people in many places, so they may ask you for help and genuinely need it. Others may ask for it, but they try and rob you. Others may need you to help someone else, and so forth. Having side missions handed out this way is much more organic and interesting than simply having many markers placed on the map, showing you where the person you need to talk to is. Granted, main missions are handled this way, but they are given through characters associated with your gang, and it makes sense. Helping people out in the wild only to see them at another time later on in town, for example, where they remember and thank you for what you did, makes the world come alive even more. Without a gigantic amount of icons on the map, or even the mini-map during gameplay, I found I could just focus on enjoying the world and focusing on how it felt real. Moving through lush areas, watching the wildlife scurry around as they herd me, or sneaking up on them for a kill, skinning the animal to help craft items, or using their meat to raise attributes, or offer up to the camp. This extended to the gang you're a part of as well, You have the strong, the weak, those you don't trust, those who are underestimated, and those you don't know too much about, just as we have these types of people in our own lives. The relationships between Arthur and those between other characters develop and change over time, and this is needed due to the length of the game and is testament to the writing of Rockstar, but because of what I see is the most important part of Red Dead Redemption 2 and why, even with its issues and problems, when we take it all in and view the big picture, it's the reason why it works so well, and that's Arthur Morgan. I found Red Dead Redemption 2 to be somewhat slow to start and get going. It felt a little disjointed at the beginning, and I kept feeling that way until it eventually clicked with me. But it's Arthur that made me keep wanting to play. Over the course of the game, he matures, he sees loss, he views some around him differently, he questions whether he is a good man at all, even in the slightest. But throughout Red Dead Redemption 2, we see his morals and principles. We see him stick up for and fight for those weaker, for the injustices which they may be victim to. He is a killer with a moral compass. He is a simple, loyal man who puts himself in harm's way to help those around him. After finishing Red Dead Redemption 2 and looking back at my playtime, I could see some of the strengths and weaknesses of Arthur within myself. The weight of Red Dead 2's success is carried on Arthur Morgan's shoulders. As a whole, the game is a triumph, but it's moved even beyond that for me, as Arthur Morgan became one of my most memorable gaming characters of all time. And if a game is doing that, then it must be something very special.